Russell Phillips decapitation, 1995 Charlotte. It was supposed to be a thrilling October afternoon in 1995 at Charlotte Motor Speedway, but it became one of the darkest days in the track's history. Russell Phillips, a 26-year-old volunteer fireman turned racer, had won the pole position and was chasing a career highlight. But on lap 36, chaos erupted. A multi-car spin unfolded ahead of him. Therefore, Phillips swerved high to avoid the wreck. In a cruel twist of fate, his car was launched into the air and slammed roof first into the catch fence. The devastating impact ripped away the roof and roll bars, decapitating Phillips instantly. In seconds, triumph turned to tragedy as debris and worse littered the track. The crowd fell into a hushed, stunned silence. Rescue workers rushed to the scene, but there was nothing they could do. For more than half an hour, fans sat in shock as the officials gathered the wreckage and even covered human remains on the asphalt. Therefore, what began as a hopeful race became a gruesome nightmare, etched forever into NASCAR lore. It's a story whispered by racing fans even today, a haunting reminder of how quickly joy can turn to horror at 200 miles per hour. Angela Harkness's true crime NASCAR saga. It sounds like a Hollywood script, but it really happened in NASCAR. In late 2002, Angela Harkness was a former stripper with big dreams, announcing her own Busch Series team amid much fanfare. NASCAR's community embraced her venture, impressed by the bold vision of Angela's motorsports. She and her lover, a Texas bank executive, presented themselves as trailblazers, bringing diversity to the sport. But behind the scenes, they were funding it with stolen money. Harkness conspired with banker Gary Jones to embezzle over $1 million from his Texas bank to fuel her racing venture. Then they bought top-notch cars and hired veteran crews, fooling everyone for a while. The team even ran a race with a well-known driver, but the money soon ran dry. Then their checks bounced. Therefore, the dream collapsed almost overnight. Harkness fled the country as the fraud unraveled, turning the NASCAR fairy tale into a federal manhunt. She was eventually caught and sent to prison. Her name has since become synonymous with one of the most bizarre frauds in NASCAR history, J.D. McDuffie's fatal Watkins Glen crash, 1991. On August 11, 1991, veteran independent driver J.D. McDuffie lost his life in a horrific crash during the Cup Series race at Watkins Glen. On lap 5, McDuffie's number 70 Pontiac suffered a mechanical failure at the high-speed loop turn, made contact with Jimmy Means, then slammed nearly head-on into an Amco barrier and tire wall. The impact was so violent that McDuffie's car flipped and came to rest upside down, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. The autopsy listed a basilar skull fracture. The 52-year-old McDuffie held the record for most Cup starts, 653, without a win. A beloved blue-collar racer who had 106 top 10 finishes, but according to his biographers, he never finished on the lead lap of a race. McDuffie's tragic death prompted significant safety changes. For the 1992 season, the track added the inner loop chicane. A gravel trap was also installed and later paved over. His accident also became a catalyst for motorsports to accelerate research into head and neck restraints. After several more basilar skull deaths, NASCAR mandated HANDS, head and neck restraint devices, on October 17, 2001 to better protect drivers. McDuffie's passing remains one of NASCAR's darkest moments, a fatal crash that led to life-saving improvements in the sport. RFK's 2022 L2 body mod penalty, 100-point hit. Early in 2022, the newly rebranded Roush Fenway Keselowski, RFK Racing team, and driver-owner Brad Keselowski were slammed with one of the harshest penalties of NASCAR's next-gen era. During a teardown after the March race in Atlanta, inspectors discovered an unapproved modification to a single-source supplied body part on the number 6 Ford. NASCAR issued an L2 level penalty that docked Keselowski a staggering 100 points in the driver and owner standings, along with a 10-point playoff deduction, a $100,000 fine, and a 4-race crew chief suspension. The punishment dropped the number 6 team all the way down to 35th in the standings, dead last among full-time teams, dealing a huge blow to their season. RFK Racing appealed, but a 3-member panel upheld the substantial sanctions on April 7, 2022. NASCAR officials later explained that a critical dimension of the part had been altered improperly during a repair. violating the strict new policy against tampering with next-gen spec components. The severe 100-point hit, equivalent to several races worth of points, underscored the sport's new zero-tolerance approach. Teams themselves had asked NASCAR to strictly enforce single-source parts rules to prevent an arms race in the garage. In the end, RFK accepted the penalty, and the episode served as a stark warning. Any attempt to skirt the next-gen rules can result in one of the harshest points deductions in modern NASCAR history: Kyle Larson's 2020 racial slur suspension and return. In April 2020, rising NASCAR star Kyle Larson was embroiled in controversy after he uttered a racial slur during an online iRacing event. The incident, which was caught on a live stream, led to swift and severe fallout. NASCAR suspended Larson indefinitely the next day for violating its member conduct guidelines, as sponsors like McDonald's and Chevrolet cut ties. Larson issued public apologies, admitting there was no excuse for his remark, and NASCAR mandated he complete sensitivity and diversity training before any reinstatement. The shocking lapse by a driver of Japanese-American descent himself highlighted NASCAR's intolerance for such language in its drive to be more inclusive. Over the ensuing months, Larson undertook extensive self-improvement efforts. He met with community leaders, volunteered with urban youth racing programs, and wrote an essay in October 2020 reflecting on his mistake and the importance of accountability. In October 2020, NASCAR announced Larson had fulfilled the requirements for redemption, including personal initiatives to educate himself, and would be reinstated effective January 2021. Under the terms of his return, Larson agreed to ongoing speaking engagements and outreach. No official end date was set, though he continued through 2023 as part of his rehabilitation. In a remarkable comeback, Larson was signed by Hendrick Motorsports for 2021 and wasted no time proving his growth, winning 10 races and the 2021 Cup Series championship in his first year back. The journey from a damaging slur to a second chance and title run stands as one of NASCAR's most dramatic redemption arcs, though it began with an incident too dark for many highlight reels. Richard Petty's brutal Daytona flip, 1988. Even the sport's biggest legends have terrifying chapters. In the 1988 Daytona 500, Richard "the King" Petty, a 7-time champion, survived one of the most violent crashes in NASCAR history. On lap 106, Petty's number 43 was tapped from behind by Phil Barkdahl at high speed, sending it sideways off turn 4. Air got under the car, it went airborne, tumbled down the front stretch, contacted the catch fence, and shed debris. After the car landed, it was struck by another car, identified in reports as Brett Bodine, before skidding to a halt. Fans held their breath as the 50-year-old Petty lay still. The crash looked unsurvivable. Amazingly, Petty walked away with no major injuries, though he suffered temporary vision problems from G-forces. The 1988 Daytona 500 was the first Daytona points race run with restrictor plates. Petty's wreck showed the plates couldn't eliminate the risk of airborne flips. Petty's wreck was often compared to Bobby Allison's 1987 Talladega crash that prompted the plates, as well as Carl Edwards' 2009 Talladega flip, all cases of cars flying into the fence at frightening speeds. Petty's miraculous walkaway was a credit to sturdy car construction and sheer luck. It also underscored how dangerous superspeedway racing remained. According to temporary reports, Petty said the race was a lot more dangerous than last year, and was later quoted in local press with colorful lines about doing things spectacular. That flip remains one of Daytona's most brutal wrecks and is less often replayed than any other incidents due to its severity. Furniture Row Racing closes 1 year after title, 2018. In a modern tale of triumph and tragedy, the little team that could, Furniture Row Racing, shut its doors just 1 year after reaching the pinnacle of the sport. The Denver-based single-car outfit shocked the NASCAR world by winning the 2017 Cup Series championship with driver Martin Truex Jr. However, by mid-2018, the team announced that it would cease operations after that season. Despite contending for a second title in 2018, Truex won 4 races and was third in points. Furniture Row simply couldn't secure enough sponsorship to continue. When a primary backer, 5 Hour Energy, decided not to renew, leaving a 14-race funding gap for 2019, team owner Barney Visser painfully opted to close the team's doors. The news sent shockwaves through the garage. Furniture Row's rise had been a feel-good story, a small-budget team from Colorado beating the NASCAR giants, and its collapse highlighted the harsh economics of the sport. The numbers just don't add up, Visser said, explaining he wasn't willing to go into debt to field a competitive car. Truex and crew chief Cole Pearn would move to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2019, but about 60 team employees were left jobless. NASCAR president Brent DeWar called Furniture Row an amazing champion and acknowledged their closure was a blow to the sport. In the end, even being on top of the world couldn't save Furniture Row from financial reality. A dark reminder that winning on the track doesn't guarantee survival. Michael McDowell's terrifying Texas qualifying crash, 2008. In April 2008 at Texas Motor Speedway, rookie Michael McDowell provided chilling proof of NASCAR's improved safety, and one of the scariest crashes ESPN rarely shows in full. During qualifying, McDowell's number 00 Toyota blew loose entering turn 1 at around 185 miles per hour. The car suddenly turned head-on into the wall, impacting with such force that it crushed and bent the safer barrier. Then the car ricocheted and began a violent series of rolls. What followed was a nightmarish sequence. McDowell's car barrel rolled 8 times down the track, disintegrating with each flip. The violent tumble finally ended in the infield grass with the car's front end completely destroyed. For several seconds, silence. Then, miraculously, McDowell emerged from the wreckage, limping only slightly and waving to the crowd. He later said, "It's just a blessing to be able to walk away. I'm fine. It's just amazing with all the safety stuff we have now." Safety officials noted that 20 feet of the steel and foam safer wall had to be replaced due to the impact's damage. Veteran drivers and commentators described it as one of the hardest hits they'd ever seen. Not only this, they also credited the Hans head and neck device, new generation car design, and safer barriers for saving McDowell's life. Indeed, the 2008 Car of Tomorrow, with its stronger chassis and larger crumple zones, performed as intended. McDowell had only minor bruises. The crash footage is so jarring that it's seldom shown without edits. But for NASCAR, it was a triumph in tragedy. A driver walked away from a truly terrifying wreck. Dick Trickle's death by suicide, 2013. Sport mourns a folk hero. The NASCAR community was heartbroken in May 16, 2013 by news that short track legend Dick Trickle had died by suicide at age 71. Trickle, a beloved Wisconsin racer famous for his plain-spoken personality and staggering 1,000-plus short track wins, was found dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound at Forest Lawn Cemetery in Boger City, North Carolina. According to Lincoln County dispatchers, Trickle apparently called 911 shortly beforehand and said there would be a dead body and it would be his. Emergency units then found his at the cemetery. The tragedy came as a shock to fans and fellow drivers, as Trickle was known for his jovial, mentor-like nature in the garage. Family members, and specifically his brother Chuck, said Trickle had been suffering from severe, unexplained chest pain and was undergoing tests, which family members said had not found a cause. They suggested the chronic pain may have contributed to his decision, but the exact motive remains only known to him. NASCAR chairman and CEO Brian France said, "Dick was a legend in the short track racing community, a true fan favorite. Personalities like Dick Trickle helped shape our sport. Fellow racers such as Rusty Wallace remembered Trickle as a mentor who taught us so much about racing." The loss of Trickle, coming after he'd given decades to racing as a driver and friend, cast a pall over the sport. It underscored the often hidden personal battles even our heroes face, and it robbed NASCAR of one of its most colorful characters in an unbearably sad manner. The racing community grieved the passing of a man, often billed as the winningest short track driver, credited with more than 1,000 feature victories in his career. Kaulig's 2023 Louvers penalty saga. Points restored after controversy. The 2023 season saw an unprecedented saga in NASCAR's appeals process, centered on hood louvers, air vent pieces, and the quest for fair penalties. In March 2023 at Phoenix, NASCAR confiscated modified hood louvers from 5 Cup cars, 4 from powerhouse Hendrick Motorsports, and 1 from the smaller Kaulig Racing's number 31, driven by Justin Haley. NASCAR levied identical L2 penalties on all 5 teams, 100-point deductions, 10 playoff points, $100,000 fines, and crew chief suspensions for illegal part modifications. Hendrick Motorsports appealed, and on March 29th won a surprising reversal. A panel upheld the violations, but rescinded all points penalties for the 4 Hendricks cars, restoring 100 points per team, while keeping fines and suspensions. 2 weeks later, Kaulig Racing went before a different appeals panel expecting equal treatment. Instead, on April 5th, the panel only partially reduced Kaulig's penalty, from 100 points down to a 75-point deduction, despite the infraction being virtually the same. The inconsistent ruling sparked uproar about fairness. NASCAR itself took the extraordinary step of requesting a final appeals officer to intervene in the interest of treating all competitors fairly. On April 18, 2023, final appeals officer Bill Mullis amended Kaulig's penalty to match Hendrick's outcome. The 100 driver and owner points were fully restored, and only the fine and crew chief suspension remained. In an official statement, NASCAR acknowledged that Kaulig's violation closely mirrored Hendrick's, and that consistency was paramount. The saga, effectively NASCAR itself asking for a lighter punishment on a violator, was highly unusual and almost unprecedented. It laid bare flaws in the appeal system and prompted NASCAR to revise rules to prevent such disparities. In the end, Kaulig got its points back, but not before weeks of confusion that left fans and teams perplexed at how identical offenses could yield different punishments. The Louvers controversy demonstrated that even off track, NASCAR drama can get pretty dark before justice prevails. Morgan-McClure Motorsports' long fade to closure, 2010s. In the 1990s, Morgan-McClure Motorsports, MMM, was a formidable single-car team, famed for its bright yellow No. 4 Kodak Chevrolet and 3 Daytona 500 victories. But the 2000s were not kind to the small Virginia-based team. As multi-car super teams came to dominate, MMM struggled to keep up technologically and financially. Longtime sponsor Kodak departed after 2003, and with it went the lifeblood of the operation. The team cycled through journeyman drivers and lesser sponsors in the mid-2000s, but performance nosedived. They failed to crack the top 35 in points and often missed races. By the end of 2007, MMM was a shadow of its former self, finishing 47th in owner points with veteran Ward Burton driving. Finally, in January 2008, co-owner Larry McClure announced that without new sponsorship, the team could not continue. He laid off 28 employees and pulled the plug on entering the 2008 Daytona 500, effectively ending Morgan-McClure's 25-year run in the Cup Series. "We were a great race team at one time. I just can't believe it might come to this," McClure said, noting that operating far from Charlotte's hub put them in a time warp as the sport evolved. Despite a last-ditch search for backing, McClure insisted we're still the best bargain in NASCAR to any sponsor. Funding never came. The team that once fielded stars like Ernie Irvan and Sterling Marlin quietly closed up shop. It was a sobering demise of a Cinderella team, from hoisting the 1995 Daytona 500 trophy to auctioning equipment in the years after their closure. Morgan-McClure's fade into obscurity stands as a dark reminder of how ruthless the business side of NASCAR can be, flaming even champions of days past.